We've got some breaking news out of the NFL where the Ravens have ruled out wide receiver Zay Flowers for Saturday's wild card showdown against the Steelers. The Pro Bowl wideout was hurt during last week's win against the Browns and will now miss his first game of the season with a knee injury. Flowers leads the Ravens this year with 74 catches for just over 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now Rashad Bateman is expected to replace Flowers as Baltimore's #1 receiver on Saturday. Our NFL analyst Tyler Sullivan is joining us here on HQ to talk about it. Some pretty big news for the Ravens here as they gear up for their first postseason matchup with the Steelers. We know the AFC North can get a little crazy. Anything can happen here. But Tyler, how are you feeling about Zay Flowers being out, and what does that mean for this Ravens offense? Does it mean we're going to see more Derrick Henry, more Lamar Jackson running the ball? How do you think they handle this with Zay Flowers being out?
Yeah, it certainly adds a different wrinkle to this, right? I think one of the big storylines going into these playoffs, specifically with the Ravens, is how is Lamar Jackson going to fare? I mean, he was able to go to an AFC championship a year ago, but we all have these little doubts of, is he able to really catapult this team to a Super Bowl run, not having your Pro Bowl wide receiver, first Pro Bowl receiver in Ravens franchise history in the first playoff game? Well, that's certainly not great. Now, as you referenced, I still think that this Ravens offense is more than capable of cushioning that blow. Of course, you would love to have Flowers on the field, but as you mentioned, you still have Derrick Henry, who ran for well over 100 yards against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense not too long ago. I believe it was like 160 yards or something along those lines. And you still have an interesting collection of pass catchers. You mentioned Rashad Bateman, which I think is certainly someone that's going to be in play. He's played well this season, kind of one of those afterthoughts, right? I think everybody drafted him in their fantasy leagues a couple of years in a row, hasn't really produced that well, and you're like, oh, well, you know what, he's not that good. He's actually been pretty decent for them this season. And let's not sleep on the tight ends either. I think that's going to be a big piece to the passing game now with Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. Those guys have already been trusted options for Lamar Jackson in the passing game, but now even more, they're going to see a lot more targets in this game against Pittsburgh.
And just to double down, we saw the numbers for the Ravens with Zay Flowers on and off the field. And yes, this is a Pittsburgh team that has lost 4 in a row, and they're not really looking like they're bringing in the same luck that we saw a little bit earlier on in the season, to all of our surprise. But going back to Rashad Bateman, is that enough against this Steelers team? It's still the Steelers. They still have great defense. But do you think Rashad Bateman is going to be enough to get them by for this matchup?
Yeah, it might level the playing field a little bit, right? I mean, I think one of the big storylines we talk about with Pittsburgh, especially over this losing streak, is just their inability to score points, right? I mean, they haven't gone over 20 points in that losing streak. They've just, the last 3 games, they've barely scored 2 touchdowns. So it's really been a concern for them as we look at this matchup. And if all of a sudden Baltimore is starting to struggle scoring points because they don't have a wide receiver, well then okay, all of a sudden we're starting to get a little bit closer here now. And especially for Pittsburgh's defense, they've been struggling over the final stretch here during this losing streak as well. As much as I think a lot of focus will be on Russell Wilson and the offense, this defense has kind of been punched in the mouth a little bit, and they've been talking about it as well. Like they want to get into this playoff game and probably prove something, not even to just the Baltimore Ravens in the NFL, but to themselves a little bit. So if all of a sudden you don't have to worry about Zay Flowers and all the things that he can do, then sure, it maybe levels things off a little bit. But I still, like I said earlier, I still think Baltimore has pieces in place to get over 20 points, 23 points, and I'm not sure Pittsburgh has that capability right now.
Tyler, let's get into the matchup because, again, it's the AFC North. We know things get crazy. These teams have already played each other a whole lot of times in the regular season. Pittsburgh, like we talked about, riding a 4-game losing streak. And even though Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season, the Steelers have lost 5 straight playoff games, the longest streak in franchise history. So you think, to your point, they're going to be playing with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, maybe something to prove. How do you think it ultimately shakes out when you're looking at this defense and the Steelers kind of limping in, the Ravens winning the AFC North, but it's still a lot of pressure because it's all about the postseason when it comes to the Ravens and Lamar Jackson?
Well, yeah, and you see it here as well on the screen with Russell Wilson, the 0-4 in this losing streak. And look at those numbers. It really has been a steep decline in terms of the passing game. And a lot of that was due to George Pickens being out, but he's been back now. And he was dealing with a lot of drops in this most previous matchup to end the season. And you just start to wonder, did they peak a little bit too early, the Pittsburgh Steelers? And is all of a sudden things are kind of wilting away? That magic maybe is a little bit lost. You talk about Mike Tomlin recent run in the postseason. again. And again, I just wonder if Baltimore, yes, of course, this is big news. Zay Flowers is not going to be in this game. He's a Pro Bowl wide receiver. I just don't know if it's going to matter that much. It'll matter when they go up against Kansas City, against Buffalo. I'm not sure about Pittsburgh now because, like I said, I'm concerned about this Steelers offense scoring 20 points. Even without Zay Flowers, I think that Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry can manufacture 20 points in a playoff game. I just do. Call me crazy, but I think that that's probably going to happen. And that's the big thing here as well. As much as we're going to talk about Zay Flowers, Derrick Henry being a part of this is why he's here, right? As much as we're talking about how successful this first season statistically was in Baltimore, he was brought here because this team could not run the football in that AFC Championship game last year against the Kansas City Chiefs. He's here now to help dictate pace in playoff games, and I think he'll do that this weekend.
Yeah, I think that two-headed monster with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, I think it's a pretty solid bet that they'll put up at least 20 points, but hey, we never know. Going back to the Ravens and honing in on that, if they do win this matchup, just how far do you think they can go this go-around? Because if we look at history, especially with Lamar Jackson and his career in the regular season, the numbers are certainly not the same as they are for Lamar in the playoffs. It's all about the playoffs. It's all about if he can get over that hump. How far do you think this team can actually go with Zay Flowers being out?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of what the prognosis is long-term for Zay Flowers, right? Because if we're talking about an injury that puts him out for wild card weekend, that's one thing. If we lose Zay Flowers for an entire playoff run, that's a whole other conversation entirely. So we're going to have to kind of massage this as we go along and kind of change these takes as we go forward, because he is a huge piece. Like, as much as I say that he isn't for this game, he's certainly a key factor as we go forward. But I do think it's going to be interesting to see how Baltimore goes here. As much as Lamar Jackson, we're going to talk about his struggles in the postseason and can he lift a team to a Super Bowl run? I think that he can. I don't really doubt Lamar Jackson's talent, and I'm not going to start now. The question for me over the last few years has been, okay, is the running game capable enough? Is the defense capable enough of helping Lamar Jackson get over that finish line? And I think right now they might be able to. I referenced Derrick Henry. Obviously, he's going to be a factor, something they didn't have a year ago. And another thing here as well, Baltimore's defense is sneaky playing well. I think that we all looked at them during the year and be like, boy, this defense, this secondary in particular, not that good. We're seeing them getting torched left and right. They've actually been playing a lot better as of late. So if all of a sudden you're catching a hot defense going into the playoffs along with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, that's a recipe for a dangerous team to go very, very far, including a trip to New Orleans in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, who would have thought we'd be talking about the Steelers defense peaking too soon and this Ravens defense peaking at just the right time when it comes to the playoffs. Tyler, we certainly appreciate it joining us here on HQ. Talking about that breaking news out of the NFL, if you're just joining us here, that just coming down, that Zay Flowers is going to be out for that wild card matchup against the Steelers. And getting a look at the wild card slate for Saturday. Kicks off 4:30 Eastern time on CBS with the Chargers and the Texans. Chargers slight favorites in that one. The spread's a little bit bigger for the Ravens and the Steelers in that AFC North showdown Saturday at 8 Eastern. And of course, the latest news there, Zay Flowers is out.